Hello and welcome back to Record of the Ear. My name is Ryan and I'm your host. This is a podcast all about scream my opinions into the void because none of my friends want to hear them. I never understood why other podcasts or videos or anything make it a surprise that album, like whatever they're talking about that day is like they're first bringing it up when it's obviously in the title. I don't get it. So without further ado, the Record of the Ear this week is Jolene by Dolly Parton. Now this is a record that if anybody has ever heard Dolly Parton, which I don't know who hasn't, you know about at least two of the songs. Jolene, obviously, the title track on it, the first track, and I Will Always Love You, which definitely more popular and more well known than Jolene, probably because of Whitney Houston. But those are the two songs that most people know. But this album I chose because it's Dolly Parton. She's probably, I know probably said this about Tracy Chapman last episode, but she is she's the queen of country, A. B, she's one of the, if not the best songwriter currently alive. A, is one of the most prolific writers of all time. B, quickest writers of all time. C, just is so good at storytelling, and that's what this album really does best. Is it's one of those albums that everything is cohesive, everything leads into another. It's just one solid story throughout, as is, I guess that makes sense because country music is about telling stories, whereas other genres don't really focus on storytelling as much as country does. And I guess that makes sense then why she is the queen, because she puts so much thought into not only the stories of the songs, but the story of the album, story and flow into each other. And this album, Jolene, is, in my interpretation, obviously, a story about a woman putting happiness into others, and hopefully leading on a positive note at the end, an optimistic note in the last track. And talking about how that happiness, putting that into others, only leads to heartbreak, only leads to yourself getting let down. It's really a beautifully told story. You kind of get a first hint at it in Jolene, and then halfway through when she starts to depart into I Will Always Love You, she kind of keeps going through the same mistakes and then ends up on a better note. But we'll go ahead and just get into it. All of the tracks on Jolene were written by Dolly herself, similar to the Tracy Chapman album. She's an exceptional songwriter. Obviously, wrote all of these. The only two she didn't write were the last two tracks, "Lonely Comin' Down" by Porter Wagner, who I Will Always Love You was written for. And It Must Be You, the last track, was written by, I'm probably butchering this, but Blaze Toasty? It's kind of a funny name. Or Blaze Toasty? I don't know how to say it. But those are the only two tracks in the last two tracks that weren't written by her. I won't get into all of the awards and recognitions and whatever because there's obviously an incredible amount. But what's interesting is it wasn't incredibly awarded when it first was released, the album or the tracks. I Will Always Love You and Jolene did get nominated as female performance for the Grammys, but other than that, the album itself was not nominated, not even for Country Album of the Year, which I find a little interesting. When it was originally released, I Will Always Love You reached number 4 only in the Canada charts. It wasn't until it was re-released on the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas soundtrack album that it got more recognition, or when it was re-recorded with Vince Gill as a duet. But when it was originally released, it did not receive that many awards. Jolene did top the country charts, though, at number 1, the song that is. Although I Will Always Love You did not. But anyway, let's just get into the album. So the first track, the title track, is Jolene. It starts with the iconic hook of the guitar. I mean, from the first 4 notes, you are easily identifying what song this is. everyone knows it. What's interesting, and I think that makes it unique, is it's in minor key, which gives it kind of a somber, eerie vibe. Um, and then obviously another thing that's interesting is starts with the chorus, the hook, Jolene, Jolene, Jolene. Just repeating that over and over again instead of going into like an intro or something like that. Um, I'm not going to dwell too much on this because everyone that knows anything about Dolly knows about this song. Um, Most people probably don't know this. Maybe they do now. It's been talked about a lot lately. There's been a lot of stuff about Dolly Parton coming out recently. This year has been like a lot of digital stuff for Dolly, but um, she's said it before. This song and I Will Always Love You, her arguably most successful two tracks, were possibly written in the same night, which is kind of crazy. They were found on the same cassette tape, which she used to record all of her songs just to get them down. And they were back to back on it, which she thinks probably could have been the same night, definitely within the same week, or else she would have used a different cassette tape. But I think it's so interesting. What's so unique about this song is that it's the take, and what's so unique about Dolly in general is she's really able to tell stories from unique perspectives and look at situations from different and unique perspectives. So she's telling a story of obviously her man cheating or wanting to cheat or whatever you want to say. But instead of being mad at the man, which I guess this is a story that in itself is not that unique. I feel like the cliche is that whoever's getting cheated on, it gets mad at the person they're cheating with rather than the person that they're being cheated on with. Um, but it's more of a pleading story about how the woman's sad and like almost Stockholm syndrome like, where she's wanting the woman to choose to move on rather than her man to choose to stay with her, which is a very interesting perspective. Like, it's not up to him, it's up to her to choose to move on. So she's basically just begging her, obviously, she says it, begging you to leave and let her stay with it. And how she wants to be with her man, even if he doesn't want to be with her, because he's going to settle for her if he can't have Jolene. This, I mean, exceptional writing, exceptional recording, iconic recording. I know that word's thrown around all the time lately, but truly iconic. Definitely give both writing and recording 10 out of 10. I mean, this is perfect track. Perfect track. But the next track is a really good follow-up. Again, everything flows into the next song, the next track. The next one, track 2, is When Someone Wants to Leave. This track is about how someone wants to leave even though you want them to stay. I guess it's in the name, obviously, but it's the logical next step of Jolene. Jolene has chosen to be with her man, and now he wants to leave, and he is leaving. It's another one of those upbeat songs with a sad message. I mean, the writing's a little clunky to me, but I guess that's kind of Dolly's signature style. It's not always rhyming and things like that, but it's still a good song, so I definitely give it a 6 for writing and 7 for recording. It just has one of those interesting upbeat songs with sad messages. I always like those. The track number 3 is River of Happiness. It's a song about finding happiness, or explaining to someone that they will find happiness again. For me, it's that next step of a friend coming in, told from the friend's perspective, consoling the main, quote unquote, main character of this album, and just consoling that person from their sadness and their loss of the relationship. Telling them that they're going to be able to find love again, telling them that there's going to be happiness, a river of happiness, not just a little trickle. They're going to find happiness again. They're going to be able to get through this. It's one of the obviously it's grading on a curve because it is Dolly, but this is one of the lower tracks for me on the album. I would probably give it a 5 as an average writing song, and then a 6 for recording. I just like the recording a little bit better. Melody is really good. The next track is Early Morning Breeze. This is probably one of my favorite tracks on it, aside from I Will Always Love You and Jolene, because it's got an upbeat, positive message, but it almost sounds like she's wailing or crying. The way she sings, it's very interesting melody. It kind of gives you a vibe that she's like trying to smile through the tears, which is kind of like what the song is about. It starts with her like trying to come out of her grief and like finding reasons to be happy again, or as she has found her happiness again, depending on how you want to look at it. She's in the process. It even mentions rainbows and finding rainbows, which was mentioned in River of Happiness in the previous track. She's finally found that place, or is in the process of finding the happy place, and she's finally getting over or through this breakup. The writing isn't exceptional, but the way that she sings it, the messaging behind the sound, is really beautiful. So I would definitely give the recording an 8, and the songwriting is 6, slightly above average, but definitely the recording way above average in the way she sings, the lyricism of it. The next track is Highlight of My Life. Now this, in my opinion, is a prequel to I Will Always Love You. It's still the essence of holding on to that person that she's trying to get over in Jolene, that first guy. It's more of an optimistic version of I Will Always Love You, kind of delusional, honestly, saying that you're the highlight of my life, obviously, you're the best part of my life, kind of almost taking a step back from Early Morning Breeze, which is just the way grief goes, I guess. But, which I guess that's another thing about this album is you could see it also as a perspective of how a person deals with grief, or how this person deals with grief. But this is definitely not as exceptional as I Was Always Love You. It's the last track on side A of the album too, which is kind of a minor note, but leading into another reason it's a prequel to I Will Always Love You. It's kind of the before, like she comes to terms with needing to leave, wanting to leave. And I would definitely give it a 6 for both writing and recording. It's okay. It's slightly above average. I mean, yeah. I'm probably biased because I just love Dolly Parton, so slightly above average for both. But the next track is I Will Always Love You. It's the realistic version of Highlight of My Life, vice versa. She's finally letting go of the man from Jolene. I usually don't like spoken word in songs, but that is kind of, Dolly does that a lot, but she's like the only exception for me, that she's so genuine and it just really fits into the story of I Will Always Love You. It's just an incredible song. Obviously everyone knows that she wrote it for Porter Wagoner when she was leaving the Porter Wagoner show, but just in context of the full story of the album, I Will Always Love You, she's finally getting over the man, she's finally leaving that guy, and moving on, and hopefully finding that river of happiness mentioned previously. Definitely 10 out of 10 for both writing and recording. It's just an incredible recording. I actually do prefer it to Whitney Houston's version, just because I feel like it's a more true performance of it. She obviously, I think 90% of the time, the writer is able to give the song more depth and emotion because they understand the lyrics on a higher level than anyone else would be able to. So I actually do prefer this version over Whitney's. Obviously Whitney's incredible, but yeah. So the next track is Randy. And this is a song about finding and moving on to basically another man falling into the same trap, quote unquote. And this is her first falling in love again since the breakup. It shows the pattern of putting happiness in relationship and not in herself. It's definitely a desperate message of trying to be this guy's only girl, saying, I just want to be yours, only girl, your only girl in your life. Because obviously she has trauma from Jolene, or the song Jolene, from the guy in Jolene. This is where I think the turning point in the record is. you kind of start to see this wasn't a one-time thing. This is a pattern in this woman's life. She's always running to these people, desperate to have their love, attention, whatever you want to say. She just values being with someone more than who it is, it almost seems. And you get a peek behind her personality rather than her situation. I would give Randy probably its placement really makes it a special song. So the writing is still good, and recording is still good, but I think the placement is really what makes it special, and it's definitely the turning point in the album for sure. I would give it probably a 7 for writing and 8 for recording. The melody is really interesting and fun for me. And along with that, the next track, Living on Memories of You, this kind of goes hand in hand with Randy. Randy left and she's devastated again, going down the same pitfalls she did before. She's showing the cycle of her life and how she's always running to these guys again. And it kind of makes you feel bad for her, but like in a different way, because she's obviously making the same mistakes, and it's obviously deeper than just being cheated on or whatever. And it makes you understand why she was begging that woman, Jolene, in the first track to stay away from her husband or I guess it might not be her husband. Stay away from her man because she feels like she has no control and she's always running into these situations. This, along with Randy, are like the turning point, quote unquote, of the album. But I would definitely give it's a good track, but it's not exceptional. It's nothing groundbreaking. So I'd give it a 6 for writing and recording. Now the next track is Lonely Coming Down. This is showing the reason behind every situation, every decision she's been making. She's still missing Randy, but you're realizing it's just about wanting to not be lonely and not be alone, and it's not exactly about who she's with. She basically can't stand to be alone with herself, with her thoughts, with her feelings, and that's why she's always wanting to be with someone. And that obviously is what she's been saying the whole song. So, it definitely gives the album, it's definitely an interesting track just because you, again, get a deeper level and understanding of who this woman is. Although we don't really know why. That'd be an interesting thing if they added why, or like a background of why she felt this way in the first place. Where did it come from? But it's definitely a track that a lot of people can relate to. A lot of people don't like being alone. This is obviously a very common problem for people to have, is attaching themselves to people that aren't good for them just because they don't want to be alone. So I'd give it a 6 for writing and 7 for recording. And then It Must Be You is the last track on the album. It's kind of the resolution to the whole album. She's finally resolved her issues, or is in the process of starting to resolve her issues. I think the person that she's mentioning in this song is God or some kind of religious figure. She kind of started to hint at it in Early Morning Breeze and River of Happiness, trying to start going into religion more and finding happiness there instead of these empty men that she keeps running to. And she's really just finding her faith, which lets her grow as a person and break that cycle of perpetual wanting. It's a nice, optimistic ending for her album, which not all of them end like that, which is nice. And she's obviously a religious person, so it makes sense for her. I really like the backup singers joining in at interesting parts. It gives it an interesting flavor. It gives it an interesting end. It kind of gives you that church choir feeling almost, which I think adds to the religious aspect of it. But it's a nice ending to where you don't feel like this woman's gonna go on for the rest of her life unhappy and lose everything that she wants constantly. So it's really fun. I really enjoy it for that aspect. So I would definitely give a 7 for both writing and recording. So as a whole, I would definitely give, based off of the songwriting, the cohesiveness of the album, the storytelling especially, this was definitely a 10 out of 10 as an album cohesiveness. Which actually kind of makes me think that Tracy Chapman shouldn't have been 10, but whatever, it was the first one. So in total, for songwriting, came out to an average of 6.9 out of 10, and for recording, adding all those up and getting an average, I got a 7.5 out of 10, which brings this to a grand total of, drumroll please, 24.4 out of 30, which means this officially surpassed Tracy Chapman by Tracy Chapman, which I did not expect. I guess I did enjoy it. I mean, listening through again, I definitely probably did enjoy listening to this album more than I did Tracy Chapman, which is interesting. I always considered that my favorite album, but by 0.4 points, Jolene wins. So this is now officially my favorite album. Well, I did not expect that, but definitely props to you, Dolly. You're now my favorite album, I can say, at least so far. Maybe we'll find another. The other one that I only think might be a contender is Back to Black by Amy Winehouse, but that's for another time. All right, well, thanks for listening. This was definitely interesting for me to listen to. I encourage you to go listen to the album back again, and just feel free to comment in the reviews and let me know what your opinions of the album were. I definitely had more of a cohesive idea of the album and kind of looked at it from that point of view. Let me know if you thought those made sense. Let me know if you think they were talking about something else in the songs. It's definitely possible. I mean, songs are about interpretation. Music is about interpretation, so that was just mine. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you guys soon. Oh, also, we now have, or not we, I started an Instagram for the podcast, so if you could go over to Record of the Ear Podcast on Instagram, feel free to follow, and we can interact more and talk about the albums and what your opinions are there if that's easier. So, all right, thanks. Bye.